Prince Harry's recent public statements have reignited debate over his security concerns and public conduct. Some commentators argue that his behavior reflects increasingly questionable judgment, suggesting that his perception of the risks he faces has become disconnected from reality. They believe his continued public comparisons and legal arguments have raised concerns about how he views his own situation. One of the strongest criticisms focuses on Prince Harry's reported comparison of his security concerns to those of author Salman Rushdie. Critics argue that the two situations are fundamentally different. Salman Rushdie has lived under a fatwa for decades, survived multiple assassination attempts, witnessed attacks on people connected to his work, and suffered life-changing injuries during a violent attack in 2022, including the loss of vision in one eye and permanent damage to one hand. According to these critics, comparing Prince Harry's security concerns to Rushdie's extraordinary circumstances is misleading. They argue that Rushdie has faced a documented and sustained international threat for decades, while Harry's publicly reported security concerns involve a much different level of risk. The commentator also argues that Harry's comparison demonstrates a serious lack of perspective, claiming there is little basis for equating the two situations. In their view, Rushdie's experience is unique and far more severe than anything Prince Harry has publicly documented. Before continuing the discussion, the host welcomes viewers to the channel, introduces herself as Brittany from Royal News Network, and encourages viewers to subscribe for more royal commentary. The video then briefly pauses for a sponsorship message from Tubes & Company, a skincare company. Following the sponsor segment, the discussion returns to the comparison between Prince Harry and Salman Rushdie. The commentator emphasizes that Rushdie has lived under an active fatwa since the late 1980s, has survived repeated threats to his life, and remains the target of extremist violence. They argue that these circumstances are incomparable to Prince Harry's reported security concerns. The commentator further claims that, based on publicly reported information, the most significant threat associated with Prince Harry has been an alleged overzealous fan or stalker. In their opinion, this does not compare to the decades-long campaign of violence and assassination attempts directed at Rushdie, whose translators and publishers have also been attacked over the years. The video concludes this section by introducing media reports claiming that Prince Harry's team has argued he deserves security protections comparable to those provided for Salman Rushdie during visits to the United Kingdom with Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet. The commentator states that the remainder of the discussion will examine those claims in greater detail. The commentator argues that Salman Rushdie's security situation is fundamentally different from Prince Harry's and contends that this difference explains why the UK government has provided Rushdie with extensive protection over the years. According to the commentator, there is no publicly confirmed evidence of a comparable threat against Prince Harry or Meghan Markle. They argue that British authorities have repeatedly assessed Harry's security needs and concluded that his level of risk does not justify the same protection afforded to individuals facing documented, ongoing threats. The discussion then turns to Prince Harry's legal challenge over security arrangements in the United Kingdom. Following the loss of his appeal for publicly funded armed police protection during visits with Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet, reports suggested that sources close to Harry believed his security should be determined by the level of risk rather than by his royal role. The commentator disagrees with that position, arguing that government officials have already conducted multiple risk assessments over several years. In their view, if intelligence agencies had identified a credible and significant threat, additional security would already have been provided. They also point out that Prince Harry has visited the UK on several occasions without any reported security incidents. To explain why they believe the comparison is misplaced, the commentator reviews Salman Rushdie's history. Rushdie's 1988 novel The Satanic Verses sparked widespread controversy, with many Muslims considering the book blasphemous. Large demonstrations erupted in several countries, including protests in Islamabad, Pakistan, where violence resulted in multiple deaths. The book was subsequently banned in several places and publicly burned during demonstrations. The situation escalated dramatically in February 1989 when Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, issued a fatwa calling for Rushdie's death and urging supporters to carry it out. As a result, Rushdie spent years living under constant police protection provided by the British government. The commentator emphasizes that the threats extended far beyond Rushdie himself. Individuals connected to the publication of the Satanic Verses also became targets. Japanese translator Hitoshi Igarashi was murdered. Italian translator Ettore Capriolo survived a stabbing attack. Norwegian publisher William Nygaard was shot multiple times but survived, and Turkish translator Aziz Nesin narrowly escaped death during the 1993 Sivas massacre, in which 37 people were killed after a hotel was set on fire by an extremist mob. Based on these events, the commentator argues that Rushdie's decades-long history of documented violence, assassination attempts, and attacks on those associated with his work places him in an entirely different category from Prince Harry's publicly reported security concerns. They conclude that this historical record demonstrates why comparing the two situations is, in their opinion, inaccurate and disproportionate. The commentator continues by outlining the long history of threats directed at Salman Rushdie, arguing that his case represents one of the most extraordinary security situations involving a public figure. They note that in 2016, reports indicated the bounty associated with the fatwa against Rushdie increased by approximately $600,000, bringing the reported total reward to around $2.80 million. The discussion then turns to the attack on Rushdie in August 2022. While speaking at an event in New York State, Rushdie was repeatedly stabbed and suffered severe injuries, including damage to his eye, neck, chest, abdomen, thigh, and hand. He was airlifted to hospital, underwent emergency treatment, and ultimately survived, though he permanently lost vision in one eye and the use of one hand. The alleged attacker was arrested at the scene and charged in connection with the assault. Based on these events, the commentator argues that governments have a strong public interest in providing Rushdie with extensive security. In their view, the danger extends beyond Rushdie himself because attacks against him also put members of the public, event organizers, and others nearby at risk. They point to the history of violence surrounding the satanic verses, including attacks on translators and publishers, as evidence that the threat has persisted for decades and affected numerous people. The commentator acknowledges that some people may argue Rushdie's writing contributed to the controversy, but maintains that few could have anticipated the scale of the international response or the issuance of a fatwa by Iran's leadership. They argue that the resulting security concerns are highly unusual and justify exceptional protective measures. The discussion then shifts back to Prince Harry. The commentator argues that, based on publicly available information, there is no evidence of a comparable ongoing threat against him. They acknowledge that Harry's military service and comments about his deployment in Afghanistan have attracted criticism and public attention, but contend that authorities have repeatedly reviewed his security situation without identifying a level of risk comparable to that faced by Rushdie. The commentator questions whether Harry's circumstances justify comparing himself to someone who has lived under a decades-long death threat backed by extremist violence. They argue that the two situations differ fundamentally in both scale and severity and believe that equating them weakens Harry's case for enhanced security. The commentator concludes by stating that, in their opinion, Prince Harry has not publicly explained the nature of any specific or credible threat that would justify a comparison with Rushdie's circumstances. They argue that if detailed evidence of such a threat existed, public opinion might be more sympathetic. Instead, they contend that the available information does not support treating the two situations as equivalent, and that the comparison has raised further questions about Harry's judgment and public messaging. The commentator concludes by arguing that Prince Harry's comparison to Salman Rushdie ultimately weakens his own case. In their view, the comparison is so extreme that it undermines the credibility of Harry's claims about his security concerns rather than strengthening them. The discussion also touches on Harry's past references to online abuse and extremist groups. The commentator acknowledges that hate groups and extremists do exist, but argues that there is no publicly available evidence showing a specific, ongoing threat against Prince Harry or Meghan Markle that rises to the level of the dangers faced by Rushdie. They contend that British authorities have reviewed Harry's security arrangements on numerous occasions and have not identified a threat requiring the same level of protection. The commentator further notes that many public figures experience unwanted attention from obsessive fans or stalkers, although such situations can occasionally become dangerous. However, they argue that this type of risk is common among celebrities and is not, in itself, comparable to the decades-long campaign of violence directed at Salman Rushdie. The discussion then turns to the wider royal family. The The commentator suggests that even senior members of the monarchy receive security based on their constitutional roles and assessed levels of risk, rather than simply because of their titles. They argue that Prince Harry, no longer a working royal and outside the direct line of succession, does not occupy the same position within the institution. According to the commentator, Harry has continued to travel internationally and attend public events without any widely reported security incidents. They argue that this public record does not support comparisons with individuals who have survived repeated assassination attempts or lived under internationally recognized death threats. The commentator also speculates that living in a constant state of concern about personal security could reinforce feelings of anxiety and suggests that security advice may sometimes contribute to heightened perceptions of risk. This is presented as the commentator's personal opinion rather than an established fact. In closing, the commentator argues that Prince Harry would strengthen his position by providing a clearer public explanation of the specific threats he believes he faces instead of drawing comparisons with Salman Rushdie. They believe that without publicly available evidence supporting such comparisons, many people are likely to remain unconvinced by his arguments. The commentator further suggests that the ongoing debate over Harry's security may also affect public perceptions of Meghan Markle and the Sussex brand, particularly as the couple continues to develop new business ventures. They conclude that, in their opinion, comparing Prince Harry's circumstances with those of Salman Rushdie is neither accurate nor persuasive and may continue to weaken public support for his position. The video ends by inviting viewers to share their own opinions in the comments and thanking them for watching before signing off.